Thank you all for joining. I mentioned this earlier. There's a little technical snafu with some of the other Zoom rooms that I'm troubleshooting at the moment, but we will get started shortly. All right, so I'm realizing now I probably should have built some time into my schedule just to be on hand for some tech support. Since this is our first time doing this, there's an issue with some of our Zoom rooms running concurrently that we hadn't. We've tested so many things, but that was one thing that we did not think to test. So I'm going to do my best to lead the session. I think this is a really juicy topic to discuss and look at together. And I'll also do my best to simultaneously check in with folks who need some support in the other rooms. So welcome. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to take a quick peek at our participant list. Looks like we have Jeff, Erica, Gregory, Lisa, Marie, Pat, Patricia, and Tomohiro. So welcome. Let me see, hopefully you can see my slides right now. I'm not going to go into presentation mode just so we can jump around pretty easily. But as you can see, if you're in the right place, if you were looking for place-based learning, leveraging face-to-face learning opportunities near and far, and this is a topic that's very near and dear to me and to the Blended Consortium. And I'm also this is a topic I love connecting with other people on, because it's interesting to see how you can approach place-based learning, when you have a national model or a global model for online learning. So let's see, we have until 50 after. So I want to make sure that I keep an eye on the time. So we have two simple goals, and I'm hoping that, I can share some examples with you, but that you will do the same, that you might have some examples or ideas that you may, of things that you've already done, or ideas of things that you would like to explore when it comes to place-based learning. But our goals are twofold and fairly simple for today. We want to look at some examples of how blended and online courses can leverage resources and connections on a local level, but also on a more geographically diverse level. And then we, want to look at what are some of the, how are the benefits or challenges, how do they compare between these different approaches? So real quickly, if you were present for the introduction, I did mention that I'm from the Bay Area Blended Consortium, and we are a consortium of currently 5 schools, expanding to 6 schools in the upcoming school year. And most of our schools were looking at joining either national or global models at one point in time, and decided that they really wanted to explore a model that would allow them to still have quality in-person experiences. And so this idea of going with a local model was born. And as you can see, there is some diversity, though. I mean, as you can imagine, if you're familiar with the Bay Area, I think there's maybe 40 miles of distance between any of our schools. And so there are differences for students who are based in San Francisco versus based in Danville versus, based up in Marin County somewhere. So there's a little bit of diversity there, but it's also local enough that our students and teachers can get together in person as well as virtually via Zoom. So real quickly, just a quick note for those of you who aren't familiar with Blended, the blend that we do, has both online, so asynchronous components, as well as synchronous virtual sessions and synchronous face-to-face. So each of our classes, each semester has 3 to 5 face-to-face classes. And it could be, if it's a straightforward class, where actual just having classroom time for students to collaborate together, such as organic chemistry or multivariable calculus. Most of those face-to-face sessions are in a classroom or in a lab on a school campus. But for other courses that are more project-based or experiential in nature, they will go on field experiences and field trips and really learn beyond the classroom. So what I'd like to do is maybe just share like a few quick examples, just so you can kind of see what that looks like. And then I found some examples from MSON that I thought would be interesting, and I didn't have any examples to include from Stanford Online. And so it'd be interesting to, as I said, I'm really hoping for you to have a chance to share some examples as well. So here's a course that just launched this fall called Art History Through Inquiry. And in this class, students meet at 5 different museums around the Bay Area, in the city, in the East Bay, all the way up in Napa. And they really are, learning by, experiencing art together. And then, let's see. And so, I know that this is something, that really engages the students in learning beyond the classroom. So then there's, very similar to that, there's also a Bay Area cinema and filmmaking course that's been about to be offered for the 5th school year in a row. And there are some museums visited, as well as students kind of have a choose your own adventure through the San Francisco International Film Festival. They look at kind of the beginning of cinema, of like motion pictures at the Musée Mécanique in San Francisco, and go to Cinema Arts at Exploratorium. There's a lot of different resources for them. And then they're, not only using that face-to-face time to go out and experience these things, but they also use some of that time for collaborating together on making films and projects like that. So let's see, maybe a couple other examples. There's Beats, Rhymes, and Life, which is a hip hop history course. The face-to-face time for this course is spent working collaboratively, as well as going to a recording studio. And so, that's something that, is kind of a culminating activity for this class, and something that the students really engage in. Compare that to a class like Entrepreneurship and Design Thinking. This is a class where, they're looking at social entrepreneurship themes, but then they're also, because of the benefit of being in the Bay Area, they're able to go and visit Facebook and visit the Google campus and learn what these businesses and industries have to share about kind of modern aspects of entrepreneurship and design thinking. Let's see, real quickly. There's some good ideas coming through in the chat. So thank you for doing that. Just a few more examples, like I said, and maybe, I won't get into too many details, so that we have plenty of time to hear some examples from you and see what kinds of questions might be out there as well. There's a Public Health and Vulnerable Populations course that, does a lot of learning in different neighborhoods, visiting hospitals, and they spend time having students collaborate and competing in a video contest that's through the Intercommunity Peace and Justice Center. And some students, there was a student team, one student from Marin Academy, another student from College Prep, who won first place last year. And let's see. Then we have seismic studies and earthquake engineering. There's lots of great resources in the Bay Area for that, including touring fault lines, meeting with engineers who are experts in this field. And students even, build a tower, and then they're able to test their towers on a shake table at Cal Berkeley. So just to give you, this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, but this is, as you can see, lots of different, whether we're looking at arts and humanities or looking at different sciences, that there's, a lot of potential for making connections, with local experts, with local organizations, with learning beyond the classroom. And as I was looking at what MSON's catalog has to offer, I noticed that they have some really great offerings involving, a similar approach, but just on a more geographically diverse level. So I don't know if this teacher from Detroit, Michigan is in here at all, but this course, Debate Local, Think Global, is I think a really great example of, taking the same idea, but then, benefiting by having students explore their different local experiences and then sharing that back with the class. Real quickly, there's one other example from MSON looking at comparative ecosystems. So as you can see, I think there's some really great ideas out there that folks are jumping in on. Why don't I pause there and just see, I'm curious, for those of you who are in the room, let me bring back your lovely faces and see, are any of you teaching courses, that are leveraging, these place-based resources or connections? Would any of you be willing to share? I'm going to look through here. Or any of you from, let's see, I know I'm looking through here. I see I've got some blended folks in the room. Are there anyone from Stanford Online that has examples of, even if it's not something that you yourself are teaching, just because I have so many examples from Blended and a handful from MSON, I'd be curious to hear if there are any examples from the Stanford Online High School world.
Lori, I can jump in here for a second. So I'm Greg Knuckles. I'm actually a counselor at the Stanford Online High School, so I'm not teaching any classes at this time, although I have taught math courses at the school in the past. We don't really do blended learning per se, I think in part because with our students being just geographically distributed, we've always tried to be fair to everybody and not sort of have special opportunities for students who might be in the Bay Area. We do have a large number of students who are in California, and a good portion of those are in the immediate Bay Area. But we really tried to focus on opportunities and classroom exercises that would be open to everybody. I know some of the science classes do things kind of similar to what's mentioned on the slide that we're seeing now. In other words, I know one of the environmental science classes, I think right now students are out like collecting mud in their general area, and then they're going to see what kind of bacteria grows in the mud or something like that. I don't know the details of the technical side of things. One reason I came to this presentation is that it seems to me that even though our students aren't sort of taking classes that are blended in the same sense that you've been describing, I think our students generally have a very blended experience, or at least they find that valuable in the sense that they do most of their coursework online, and that's where they're interacting with their friends and peers and instructors. But then we do offer these, I guess we're doing it now 3 times a year, opportunities on the Stanford campus, as well as a lot of other meetup opportunities around the country and throughout the world, where students can get together with each other and, both just hang out, but also talk about some of the things that they're interested in academically. And the students find that really valuable, the opportunity to get together. So I think their overall experience is blended in a sense, even though their courses are not necessarily blended, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, yes. Thank you for sharing that. Are there, let's see, other examples worth putting out there from MSON? Are there any, I'm looking, kind of scrolling through to see, I don't know who's from MSON versus Stanford Online, but are there any MSON folks who are familiar with their colleagues' classes, either comparative ecosystems or debate local, or perhaps other courses in your catalog?
Well, hi, I'm Jeff Edmonds. I'm from University School of Nashville, and I'm USN is part of the MSON consortium. We're not doing a ton of stuff, but one reason I'm here is that we're trying to get into place a senior capstone project that's going to get folks out into the community, either doing internships, or I think what we would really like is for them to, the idea right now is to explore a kind of hidden side of Nashville. So, we don't have anything right now, but we're certainly very interested in developing something. So just throw that out there.
I love that sound of hidden Nashville, because I think a lot of our towns and cities everywhere have maybe a hidden side that it's worth encouraging students to dig deeper into. Very cool. Now, a quick note, if any of you are here because the initial session you were trying to join was having some technical difficulties with the links, I will admit that is entirely my fault. And as I've been paying attention to some chat streams, and it looks like the links have been updated. So if there was another session that was your absolute first choice session that you were disappointed to not get into, you might want to try that link now. I believe they had a refresh with either BlueJeans or Adobe Connect links. And I apologize for the Zoom mix-up that just happened. But for those of you who are excited about this topic, please do stick around. But I realize that might be the case if you had some technical difficulties. So,
Hi.
Go ahead.
Oh, hello. Hi. I was just wondering if anyone knows. So I always feel I joined this session because I feel like there's always something exciting out there to do with science and, English, politics, etc. And I feel like in a way math is missing out on that fun, of like going out there. So I'm curious if anyone has any, if you've heard of any math classroom doing this at all.
That's a great question. And it's something, so one of the things that's been on my mind, because I and along with some colleagues from Blend Ed, we've been asking, could we, encourage the other classes like a multivariable calculus class or an organic chemistry class or an advanced computer science class to do more with local area connections. And, I think one way that seems easier to imagine that is through using, bringing, whether it's visiting experts who are actually, doing math or using math in their field in some interesting way, whether you're taking students there or having beaming those experts into your class, that seems like a pretty good starting point. Are there other ideas out there or examples?
Yeah, so maybe I will jump in. So I, like 5 or 6 years ago, I was, or maybe much more. So I was teaching AP Stats in online high school, and so as Greg said, that course was taught largely online, but so there was no opportunity for students to meet up for the course. But we had this, as you can easily imagine, AP Statistics has lots of nice kind of very, readily applicable tools and so forth. So students has these project to do something with the statistics tools that they learned in the class. So students had this, project of taking a water sample around their areas, like from the park or different kind of parts of their surroundings, and then measure a certain aspect of the water quality and shared the information with other students. So they were working in different areas, but did the same kind of experiment and then shared the result in class. So that's something that I can imagine that could be applied in the context of blended education, right? Students can go to some place and do some sort of, as you said, like some scientific, but thing that their math knowledge can be applied. Right, statistics is easy, but I was imagining also, like I've been teaching also another course which had some heavy content on astronomy, right? And then kind of sundials and all that sort of stuff. I think when we think about those kinds of tools, there are lots of applications, opportunity for like geometrical knowledge they have and so forth in a very fun way, right? That they can actually use their hands with. So yeah, so that's my comment.
Thank you.
Other ideas or examples out there?
I wonder, I remember this from being an undergrad at UCLA, and I remember that the architecture students had done a project just looking at the architecture on the UCLA campus. And, architecture is very math heavy. And so I wonder if, whether it's kind of a local project or sort of in a geographically diverse program, if you could have students, looking at their local architecture and doing something mathematical with sort of that and sharing that as some kind of project, that could be interesting to me.
I like the sound of that. I'm curious, Erica, I think that was your original question. If you had if you had access to any kind of experience for your students, is there something that comes to mind for you that you would want to?
There is something, well, actually not for my MSON course, but for the pre-calculus course, something that I'm bringing to my current school, but it is more of like a local thing, is we are starting the volunteer income tax assistance program. So as part of pre-calculus, we have a unit on piecewise functions. And the way I teach that is I say, okay, like, let's look at our tax brackets. Let's look at the different income taxes. So we derive like that mathematical model, and then we get into taxes. And so this year we're having students actually get tax law certified to be able to volunteer at, just local tax places as part of the community. So they'll be going out there helping people, low income people, fill out their tax forms for free. So that gives them the experience outside. It's, for me, the difficulty, I'm no math PhD, but the difficulty comes with teaching those higher level math courses like multivariable and seeing a direct connection and application. And I know that there are tons, but it's still difficult for me to, make those connections for students. And I want them to see the excitement and, the actual true application. So that's where I am at.
Very cool. I know one thing that's worth mentioning, and I met some folks from an organization called EduCurious at a conference years ago, and I've been meaning to circle back to them, but they, their whole mission is to design project-based curriculum that comes with a network of experts. So for instance, if you're a literature teacher, you can read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. I hope I'm not mixing up that name, but then you can also, like, part of their curriculum is that you get to actually meet with the author, Rebecca Skloot, and ask her questions. And then I think they also have, genetic scientists that students have access to ask questions. And so it would be interesting, I think, for some of the topics that are, that maybe, aren't as straightforward or maybe just aren't as obvious for those connections. It would be interesting to connect with an organization like that, where like that's their specialty, is developing a network of experts that could, be of use for math and other subjects. So if you hadn't heard of EduCurious, definitely check them out. They've been around for a while now. I think they're based out of the Seattle, Washington area. But they do curriculum that's used in both public and private and institutions nationwide, as far as I know. So I think one of the goals I mentioned was that we would look at some of the different kind of pros and cons. Let's see. Here we go. Involved in local versus geographically diverse. I think that's something, that I've been thinking about a good amount, because I do see that there's these amazing national and global models out there, and of course, the broader it is, the more variety of perspectives and lenses that you will bring to the experience for all of your students. Whereas, the flip side to that is if you have a more local based, whether it's something, if it's something that you're doing just at your school that you're not, sharing with a larger consortium even, then that approach is just going to allow you to have more of those interpersonal, in-person, face-to-face connections, whether it's between students, between the whole class, or, having field trips where you're actually, meeting with people in person, or having an experience in person together. So, I don't think that there's any one way that's better than the other, but there certainly are different advantages to consider. As I looked at some of those MSON models, I think a lot of those, there's some really great examples of labs and things that would really be student-led. So, students would get instructions, but then they'd have to kind of translate that to their own local area. And so it would end up being, much more student-led, which I think is a benefit. Whereas if you have a more local approach, then you can really have teachers be more hands-on with curating the experiences for students. So, as you can imagine with any field trip, especially a class that has multiple field trips, there's always a lot of logistics involved. So having a teacher being able to be more hands-on is valuable. But then the flip side to that is if you have a more geographically diverse approach, then there would be fewer logistics to have to wrangle. Because I think, for blended teachers, that's one of the drawbacks is that there's quite a bit, not just arranging the field trips, but then dealing with students coming from multiple different schools and their schedules and their locations and that kind of a thing. So I'm curious, because I think if I was going to look, I don't know if some of the blended folks are still in the room. Is there any? I'm curious because I see, for instance, Barry, who teaches the Art History Through Inquiry, and Liz, who in the past has taught an amazing Bay Area field ecology course. If there's anything that I've forgotten to mention or that you think would be valuable to bring up in this group, feel free to speak up. Not to put you on the spot.
Well, I would, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would just say, to me, I did the Bay Area field ecology for 3 years, and it was definitely a challenge figuring out how you can do ecology online. And so I built it all around kits and getting kids in the field and starting with a immersive experience right from the beginning, where we did a camping trip and learned how to use some of the tools, and just constantly looked for things that we couldn't do in a face-to-face classroom to make it work. And it was great. And, now I'm looking at ways to try to do even more immersive experiences. So I'm going to lead a session in the next one about summer experiences and making that into like a trimester course. But I would love to think even bigger and collaborate with schools all around the country, or, think about global trips like Galapagos Islands. I mean, I'm a biologist, so anything in the field is exciting, but the math ideas like applied math could be really cool. And I just think collaboration is, can be very exciting.
Can you think about, like, if you were to teach students from all over the country or all over the globe a field ecology course, do you feel like that's something that would be a drastic departure than how you approached designing a local version of the course?
Well, I guess when I think about it that way, I think about an experience that would be built around a trip. For example, like if you went to the Galapagos with kids who were able to do that, and then you could design the whole course around evolution, and we'd have that shared common experience that you could constantly refer back to the trip and things that you did there. So I think it would be different, but it would offer different opportunities.
Yeah, that makes good sense. I would even think for Barry's course, an Art History Through Inquiry course, that's something that it would be, of course, I think when we think on a local level, it makes sense of how it works to go and visit museums together. But it does seem like it's something that could translate, fairly easily to a more national or more geographically diverse approach, where I think the trick would be figuring out, like whether students would actually, be tour guides and somehow find a way to virtually bring their classmates to a museum in their local area to share, or if there would be some other, maybe more asynchronous approach where they'd have to make a video or some other presentation about their experience to share. But it certainly is possible, I would think. Any other? Go ahead.
Along those lines, one thing that, like during Zoom meetings, when I did my Bay Area Field Ecology course, I would have my kids act as naturalists for their own neighborhoods. So during some Zoom meetings, they would have to present an artifact or something that they found in the field. And that was pretty fun because they could see that when we went out on field trips with naturalists or experts, and then they got to try that on during a Zoom meeting. So you could apply that to, multiple different courses.
Very cool. I was trying to capture a few notes from things that people have brought up, but I think that's worth putting in here. Other ideas or questions that are out there. I know there are many of you in here that were drawn to this subject for one reason or another. So feel free, don't be shy if you've got a question or an idea or a fresh lens to put on this.
So if I may jump in, like it's a little less, specific or, course-based comment, but, in response to this idea of, what's the value of like face-to-face, kind of thing. So what I, just to myself personally, like find is a helpful question for me is what is the perception of the difference, right? Difference between face-to-face and completely online, rather than the difference itself, right, between these two things. So what kind of perceptions do people have about that difference, right? So rather than, again, right, the difference itself, what I mean by that is, if people feel, so when we ask the question like, can art be taught online? Or, do we need face-to-face or, actual experience of seeing the particular art, right? That question is interesting and we can pursue it, but we are dealing with students. So, thinking about what they might be kind of perceiving the difference and, if they think that, face-to-face is really helpful for them to be connected as a friend, I think we can act on that perception that we believe students have. And so forth. So I often kind of differentiate those two questions, perception question and actual difference question, and then try to kind of act on that, kind of take advantage of the existing perception of the difference. So it was a little too much of a general comment there, but just to the main theme, general main theme of this session, I just wanted to.
That's helpful to hear, because I do agree. I think part of, what also led to the creation of the Blend Ed Consortium has a lot to do with this perception too, and that, the students who are drawn to our schools really value the in-person student-teacher connections. And so I think that was one of the things we were worried about losing. And we thought this model would allow us to stay rooted in that, even while also moving to a more, online, self-paced to a certain degree, student-directed approach to learning. So I feel like that's a good topic maybe to go a little deeper into for a future Bolt session even. So thank you for bringing that up. Well, so as the session A and session B are designed to be short and sweet, a chance, just to, put some ideas and examples out there that hopefully, will just be enough to plant some seeds with you, that it's something that if you want to continue this kind of discussion, we could in the future, have a session where we bring together teachers who are, all doing quick demos or sharing out of what this looks like in their classes. I'd love to reach out to the teachers from MSON and have them, participate and show us more about what that looks like in their classes. So I hope that this is, a good kind of overview of just, some of the things that are worth thinking about when you're thinking about, making the most of place-based learning, whether it's a more local or a more geographically diverse approach. So thank you all for being here. I believe there's a little passing time between this and the next session. If you experience any technical difficulties, please do not hesitate to reach out to me or Claire or Ben or Kim, and we will certainly help you navigate anything that might arise. But thank you all for being here. I hope you enjoy other sessions that you have ahead of you. Thank you. And I'll stick around if anyone has more questions. Good to see you again, Jeff, by the way. Bye. Good to see you, Barry.